Well, the opportunity to play Vector came about when I was voicing an entirely separate game that was also directed by Liam O'Brien, who directed Operation Raccoon City. And we were in the middle of the session, and he said, "Hang on a second." Kind of looked at me and raised his eyebrow and said, "Could you say these separate lines for me? But say them as if you're the coldest, most amoral, heartless killer that you've ever known." I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure, I know tons of people like that. That's not a problem." So I said the lines, and he said, "That's great. That's great. I really like that." But he didn't tell me what the project was. And a couple of months later, I get a phone call from my agent, and she says, "Well, you're going to be playing this character in a code-named game," because, many, if not most of the games now, due to confidentiality reasons, are code-named. They don't even release the real name of the game. So when I showed up, Liam was there, and he was like, "Yeah, this is it. This is the game." And, of course, everyone had to be tight-lipped about it, but I was like, that's pretty cool. And then he showed me a picture of Vector, and I was like, okay, I can slide right into this. This is no problem. So it was a pretty interesting ride, and it's probably one of the most interesting ways I think I've ever gotten a role. And all respect due to Liam O'Brien, because he was the one who picked me. Vector's kind of an interesting guy because of all the people that are on my squad, he's really the only one who doesn't have, per se, a real name. He exists solely as Vector, which is a little more mysterious and kind of frightening about him because clearly he either has a past that he wants to obscure or hide, or he just only wants to exist as that person, as Vector. And that's something that, from an identity standpoint, it's always fun to dive into as a voice actor, but having grown up in a world where a lot of people existed only with their aliases, and a lot of people, you never even really knew their real name, it was something that kind of struck a very resonant chord with me because, I identified with that very profoundly. So it was kind of an odd thing to sort of have that feeling of attachment to him. I don't think Vector even really is a bad person. I think he just sort of exists within a world where he has a very linear way of understanding the way things operate. He's simply given a directive and he carries it out. He's not really terribly concerned about what's going to happen as a result, vis-a-vis collateral damage or peripheral injury to somebody. He's just there to make the directive and the mandate happen, to make it execute. So, yeah, kind of mysterious doesn't really even cover it. He's more somebody who exists in a world where he sees things entirely differently than many, if not most people. Wow, I hope I don't have too much in common with Vector because that's the kind of stuff that can land you in jail. I think I do have in common one particular thing with him, and that is his single-minded drive to achieve a goal. He's not somebody who talks about doing things. He simply understands the mandate and then goes forth and executes it, irrespective of obstacles, hurdles, blockages, difficulties. He overcomes and surmounts them and makes it happen. And that's something that I've tried to embody for a very, very, very long time. He's somebody certainly who, driven is kind of an understatement with him. He just simply does it because he knows no other way to do it. That's just exactly who he is. I mean, Vector in that sense is an approach on a target. So even his name is symbolic of going out, establishing a presence, executing the goal, and returning home successfully. I'm extremely grateful for that. I mean, this is hands down the greatest job I've ever done. And I was in the music industry. I made albums the whole bit. So I was a recording artist for several years. So doing this and certainly having people be fans of my voice is a huge honor, and I'm extremely grateful. This job, I can't tell you how much fun it is to do this job and to cut loose, and especially with characters like Vector, to really get into intense, powerful characters that have rich histories and that have rich parameters and environments that surround them. It's an incredible thing to be able to do. It's very fulfilling. It's exhausting work, but it's very fulfilling, very rewarding, and a lot of fun. So definitely, thank you so much. If you're a fan of my voice and the work that I've done, I can't thank you enough. It means so much to me. And definitely, thank you so much if you're a fan of Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City. This is actually the first time I've ever played any of the Resident Evil games with any degree of depth. I have a lot of friends who are incredibly huge fans of the franchise, but this was the first time I got to navigate the world sort of by myself and to dive into it. And I've always known that the whole Resident Evil world has had an incredibly rich history with very powerful, dark, underpinning metaphors that tie it all together. So it was a pretty incredible experience to be the first time that I got into the game was as one of the lead characters for the game. And it was a very intense experience. It's very easy to see how you can become a huge fan of this right away. Very powerful, really engaging, and extremely exciting. Two of the other characters that I really like are Beltway and Lupo. But, I just like my team because I think we have the coolest outfits. Well, I'd like to say that I like good characters, but I gotta be honest, I kind of like the bad characters, and I'm really still not sure what that says about me. But yeah, I really do enjoy the bad characters. I played Storm Shadow in G.I. Joe Renegades, and Storm Shadow is a morally conflicted at best guy. He's certainly not a nice guy, and he certainly does possess some character traits that some people might find, I don't know, a little offensive. But he's an incredible character, and I relate very closely to that sense of independence, that sense of the sense of forthrightness. But Vector is kind of a different person because he's not, I would say, bad per se. He exists really to execute a mandate. There is no good or bad for him. There is simply do. And whatever he needs to do or needs to be done, he does it. And if it's bad, it's bad. If it's good, it's good. Those are kind of ancillary, secondary things to, and I don't even really think he looks at things in a sense of, is this bad or is this good? He simply looks at it in terms of the logistics he's going to need to execute it, what the risks are, and how long it's going to take him. Compensation or moral positioning are not really things that are in his vocabulary or his mentality. So I don't really think he's good or bad. He's not immoral, he's more amoral. Well, Vector's voice is clearly not my natural speaking voice. It is close in the sense of timbre, but obviously different in the sense of where it's placed. It's more of kind of a throaty, raspy kind of a thing, and it's much lower and certainly much more threatening. All of the sessions that we did were first thing in the morning, so my voice hadn't quite warmed up yet, but I used all of that to my advantage. That was exactly where we wanted it, so it was easier to put that kind of husk and rasp and that sinister threat on everything that he says. And Liam in the sessions was very, very cognizant of how to elicit the best performances out of me. Because he had the greater view of exactly what was going on during the whole game, he did an incredible job directing and providing context and eliciting a performance that was extraordinarily helpful in developing and getting Vector, not even so much from a vocal quality standpoint, but from a personality standpoint to where he is. So Vector is as much him as it is what I put into it. So it was that collaborative effort of both of us and what we did together that got him to where he was. That's actually a great question because I was just having this debate with somebody not too long ago about how a movie exists as a singular iteration of a plot that remains unchanged irrespective of how many times you see it. A game, an interactive game, will change many, many times, almost as many times as you play it, depending on what you do or the choices that you make. And the experience is so much more immersive and personal. So the amount of thought and the amount of writing and crafting and set design, both digital and physical, for interactive games is easily on a par with Hollywood blockbuster movies. Yeah, and from a thematic standpoint, as far as the depth of the story, yeah, also just as powerful and just as evocative as a lot of major movies are. And they have to be because you take on the personality of the individual that you immerse yourself in the game as. And if you don't fully believe what's going on in the game, then you're not going to immerse yourself in it. Just as when you watch a movie, if you don't believe what is actually happening, the movie isn't engaging. That's the difference between, a garbage movie and a really, really good one, and the difference between a game that's not so great and a game that's incredible. I have seen the movies and I like them, which is strange for me because I'm not really sort of a fan of that genre, but those movies are compelling and exciting and intriguing to me. Like I said, the violence isn't really sort of the thing. It's the darker metaphor that underpins them. There's a rich kind of a history and a fabric that ties the whole movie together, that ties the Resident Evil narrative together. On an entirely separate thing, what's really cool is that women are portrayed as strong, powerful leaders. And that's something that specifically in this genre, you don't really normally see. That's not a common thing. There's a brave aspect of storytelling that's incorporated when women are the ones who move things forward. Women are the ones who have that fortitude and that strength and that ability to stand and to lead people into battle. That's an incredible thing. And that's something that I think that when you look at a lot of other films that have similar plot lines or similar themes to them, women are almost played in a secondary, an ancillary, a weaker role, and it gets tired. It gets really, really tired. It's good to have a female as a role model in that position to say, no, a woman can handle this and a woman is strong enough to do this. So that's kind of a secondary thing that I really like about the franchise. I have played the game, and it is very, very intense. I remember when we were recording, I would say things, and then I would pause, and in my head I was thinking, I can only imagine what's going to happen on screen when I'm saying this. And sure enough, when some of the renderings came back, I was like, oh my goodness, my imagination didn't even do it justice. It was incredible. So in with each step that I saw as it got closer to development and completion, and especially even with the trailers that came out, I was just like your jaw would hit the floor looking at what was going on. And yeah, it's a pretty incredible thing to behold. And when you see other people play it and how much they get into it, it's a pretty cool feeling. It is a pretty cool feeling. Well, the unfortunate thing about that is pretty much everybody you do an interactive game with or even a cartoon with now, they make you sign very stringent non-disclosure agreements. So I can't really disclose anything that's in the works that hasn't been released. But by the time you hear this, Prototype 2 will have been released, and I'm in that. But there are a couple of things coming up in the near future that I will be in, which I'm pretty excited about, and on many different fronts. So there are things definitely in the works, but unfortunately I can't disclose what they are. Absolutely. Thank you so much, and I am so glad that you enjoy Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City, and I'm glad that you enjoy my work in there as Vector. And if you followed other work that I've done, I can't tell you how grateful I am for that. That is certainly a motivating factor when I step behind the mic. It's so much fun, and it is such an honor to do what I do, and I can't tell you how humbling it is to have people enjoy what you do and to share that with them, and to be a part of a collaborative process with other incredibly talented actors, writers, producers, animators, coding people, everybody who puts these projects together, because, I simply am the voice among many, many other people that make these things come to fruition and bring them into existence. So thank you so much for enjoying what I do. And on behalf of everybody else who was involved with Resident Evil, the entire franchise, thank you also for enjoying Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City.
This is Vector, and I recommend Resident Evil Database for true Resident Evil and Biohazard fans. Target eliminated.